All right, Alexander, let's talk about the missile strike into Dnipropetrovsk, the statement from Russian President Vladimir Putin, and what comes next, the warning from Russian President Vladimir Putin. I believe it's the final warning that he's going to give to the collective West, specifically to the US and the UK. And we're heading into very dangerous a dangerous period, a dangerous 2 months, because my fear and my sense of things is that the uh, the U.S. and the U.K., the Biden White House and Keir Starmer administration, they're not going to listen to the Russian president, even though I believe the Pentagon is getting very worried about the situation. So maybe we begin with the new weapon, the new missile, and we can take it from there.
Indeed. Can I just first of all say that I think we are in a very dangerous period. I don't think we're heading into it. I think that when the missile strikes took place against Russia over the course of this week, a massive line was crossed. I agree with you completely that this is the final warning. And I think people who pretend otherwise or still think that the Russians are bluffing are deluding themselves. Now, I think that this missile strike on Dnipro, on the gigantic Yuzhmash factory in Dnipro, has, however, come as a serious shock. I've been reading the British and American media. I've been looking also at the British military media, also people whom I know are connected to the military. For example, a man called Ramadi, who writes for the Daily Telegraph. He's at King's College, which is a college in London, which is well connected to the military. He's been an extreme hardliner. He now finally admits that we're in a very, very risky situation, that we are poking the bear, as he put it, and that there is now a real possibility that things could get out of control. That is a complete change of language from people like him, I should say. Now, the reason that's happened is twofold. Firstly, it's what Putin has said, and we will come to that in a moment. But let's first, as you said, look at the missile that was used. So this is the Oreshnik. It means hazel, apparently, in Russian. Very typical Russian name for a weapon system. They like to choose rather ordinary words for their weapons rather than very dramatic ones. So that one occasionally gets the odd exception. This is a very powerful missile indeed. It has intermediate range. So that means that it can hit any target anywhere in Europe, including, by the way, the UK. It is not designed to strike at the continental United States, though I am going to suggest that we need to think about the implications of that, and that might change as well. Now, the thing to say about it is that it is apparently a development of an earlier missile called the Rubesh. The Rubesh was a shorter range, lighter missile that the Russians have had under development for some time. Development stopped a couple of years ago. It has apparently been restarted with the missile being reconfigured to carry more hypersonic warheads and to be more hypersonic itself. So it apparently can achieve speeds within the Earth's atmosphere of 12 times the speed of sound. And it carries 6 warheads. Now, these warheads are what are called MAVD warheads, which is to say that they can independently maneuver, and they do so achieving hypersonic speeds. And each warhead within itself carries 3 further rounds. So you can see that we're talking about one missile, and this missile is able to hit 18 targets. And obviously, it can hit 18 targets with each target being hit with a nuclear device, because these warheads are designed to carry nuclear nuclear devices, or alternatively, and there is some uncertainty about this, they can either carry explosive devices or they can do their damage through the sheer force, the kinetic energy of a strike um, caused by a missile that is flying at 12 times the speed of sound. And it seems that the kinetic energy is simply tremendous. Any one of these missiles would do colossal damage. Any one of these warheads, I should say, would do colossal damage to any object that it struck, even if it wasn't carrying an explosive device at all. So this is an extraordinarily powerful system. It can hit any target in Europe. And as Putin reminded everybody, there is no air defense system in existence or planned or being designed that is capable of intercepting it. It means that the Russians can attack any target they wish right across Europe, military headquarters, governmental buildings, industrial facilities, shipyards, aircraft carriers, warships, and they can reach these targets. And because of the incredible speed at which these missiles move, the Ukrainians say that it took this missile 15 minutes to reach its target in Dnipro from the city of Astrakhan on the Caspian Sea. And apparently there are others who think that the time was even shorter than that. Basically, there is no time to redeploy personnel or equipment or whatever the target is to protect the target once this missile is heading in that direction. So this is an extraordinarily powerful system, one that the Russians have not commented about previously, one which the Americans had only sketchy information about. Putin has said that it is now being placed in serial production. This was, if you like, a flight test of the prototype system. It has been a completely successful test, and we must now look forward to seeing more and more of these missiles deployed.
And Russia has a whole lot of other missiles that can do just as much damage, if not more, including reaching the United States.
Absolutely,
So,
and I wanted to say something.
and real quick before you, you comment, from what I understand, the Oreshnik did not have a payload. Is that?
That's right. Well, that's
what analysts say. But anyway, yeah,
that's what analysts say. But as I said, the sheer kinetic force of one of these missiles, one of these warheads, simply hitting a target is so tremendous that it arguably doesn't need an explosion, explosives inside it. The damage done, even without explosives, is simply tremendous. Now, I just wanted to make a quick observation about whether or not this missile might eventually be able to target the United States itself. Over the last couple of years, the Russians have been speaking about developing a next generation submarine, nuclear submarine, called the Laika. Laika is a breed of Russian dog. And they have spoken about this submarine being equipped with a missile with these kind of warheads, a hypersonic ballistic missile with these sort of warheads. Now, if a submarine like that is developed, then of course it could operate near the coast of the United States and it could strike targets in the United States. And for all I know, that is the plan. And as you rightly say, the Russians have many other kinds of missiles. They have intercontinental ballistic missiles, which is what some people initially thought this was.
Avant-garde.
They have lots of other missiles as well.
Yeah, the avant-garde and all of these
Absolutely.
missiles. Yeah. Okay, so Putin has given his final warning. What do you think comes next? What is if you had to take a guess? What do you think the Biden White House and the UK are going to do now? We have a word that NATO is going to have an emergency meeting on the 26th
Mm.
to discuss this new weapon. And you have Ukraine, as well as, unfortunately, it's amazing. It's incredible that this is happening. But you have a lot of leaders, especially in Europe, who continue to insist that Putin is bluffing. He's bluffing. Don't believe him. We need to continue to strike at Russia with ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles. A lot of leaders, a lot of media in the UK, in the US, in Poland, in the Baltics are urging the Biden White House and Keir Starmer to press on and to continue to attack Russia. Orban, once again, is the only leader. Orban and Fico, Vucic as well, actually, but I'm looking at the European Union, Vucic being outside the European Union. They have all said Putin is not bluffing. He's not bluffing, they've said. They're on record. What are your thoughts?
Right. Well, I think the first thing to do is just look at what Putin actually said. He said, we have this capability. We are absolutely prepared to use it. If missile strikes against our territory continues, then we reserve the right to conduct strikes ourselves against the countries which are involved in carrying out these strikes against us. So he's basically signaling that at some point the Russians will launch a strike against Britain and, of course, France as well, if France continues to conduct strikes like this against Russia. And by the way, if that happens, the political effect is incalculable. British and French publics have not been prepared for this. I don't think anybody outside the military or the political class has really discuss this in any serious way. If a thing like this happens, even if only conventional warheads are used, which I presume initially they would be, it would come as a simply enormous shock to the public, certainly in Britain and also in France. Now, I don't think Putin is bluffing. I've seen absolutely no evidence that he's bluffing. There's, as you correctly say, Orban has said that he's not bluffing. Fico has said that he is not bluffing. Now, remember, Hungary and Slovakia are both members of NATO. So they will attend that meeting, that NATO Council meeting, on the 26th of November. And they will be speaking out there. I think they will not be alone. By the way, I think Italy has already signalled that it is very, very worried and unhappy about the course events are taking. And I think various other governments are worried also as well. Germany, of course, is in a state of crisis. Chancellor Scholz has just seen off a political challenge from his defense minister, Boris Pistorius. He's still chancellor. He's still opposing delivery of Taurus missiles. He knows perfectly well the German public opinion opposes any escalation. The British government, I'm afraid, is, I think, obsessed with escalation. They have an economic crisis on their hands. I get the sense, however, that the British military are in shock about what has happened. They did not expect that the Russians would demonstrate a capability like this. I suspect that the British military, which does have some very, very intelligent people amongst it, are now telling Starmer, look, this has gone as far as it can. We have to back off. The strike with the Storm Shadows apparently was not a success. We've been given details about it by Putin. It didn't hit the command post that it was intended to hit. I've no doubt that the Russians are telling the truth about that. So we are throwing away expensive Storm Shadows and ATACMS missiles to achieve nothing of significance. We are simply provoking the Russians into an escalation which our missiles cannot match. The capability we have, unless we go nuclear, is feeble by comparison to what the Russians have just shown that they can do against us. Now, I hope Starmer is listening. I'm not confident that he is. We know previously that the Foreign Office has advised against this action. And that, of course, brings us back to the United States, because it is in the United States that the key decisions are going to be made. Now, again, there's been a complete silence right up to the moment of the launch of the ATACMS missiles from the Pentagon. That silence basically continues. We've had some extremely evasive statements from Sabrina Singh. She's the Pentagon spokesman. She's just commenting, giving basically factual statements about what has happened. I think that there is growing alarm in the Pentagon about this whole situation. I think they're urgently, my guess is that they're urgently advising the president to slow down. The trouble is that I don't sense that the president himself understands the incredibly high stakes game he's playing. I don't think the president has much grasp of anything anymore. And the people around him, well, any situation where Jake Sullivan, his national security advisor, appears the relative moderate, tells us that the people around the president are hardliners of various types, because Sullivan is hardly a moderate in any real or genuine sense. So I hope that these voices of restraint are heeded. At the NATO summit meeting, Fico and Orban will have an opportunity to state their views. Erdogan, by the way, will be there as well, and he also is clearly very alarmed about the situation. But I have to say, one mustn't assume, one certainly shouldn't think that the prospect of further escalation from the Western side has gone away.
Well, the U.S. doesn't have to act in line with NATO or the U.K. No. They can act on their own, and it does look like they have been acting pretty much on their own. Peskov said in a statement that they even gave the United States a 30-minute warning via various military channels. They had 30 minutes plus the launch of the missile and up until the time of its arrival. So you could say they had a good 45 minutes and they could not stop this thing. And Putin said that he's going to, before they launch the next strike, if they do launch the next strike with these missiles, these hypersonic missiles, he will notify civilians to leave the areas.
Yes.
Which means that the Russian military is so confident that this cannot be stopped, that they're going to give an ample amount of time for civilians and even the military targets that they're going to hit to try and stop this, to try and leave the area and the military air defense systems to try and stop this missile, but they will not be able to. I mean, Putin was very clear in his statement. You will not be able to stop this missile. It is impossible. Those are the words he used. It is impossible to stop this missile. So I just wanted to add that to what you said. Why do you think the UK military has very capable people? If they had very capable people, wouldn't those capable people have told Stammer, who's not demented, who's not insane like Biden, at least from what we know, right? I mean, he's not, mumbling and bumbling like the past 3 years of a Biden administration, or like President Biden. So you would think that the one-time lawyer, Keir Starmer, relatively young guy, looks like his brain is functioning to a certain extent, would have these military officials telling him, don't launch Storm Shadow missiles into Ukraine, or don't go to the United States to help us launch Storm Shadow missiles into Russia. Sorry, because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about: the UK going to the United States and getting the permission and the help and the coordinates and targeting to launch those Storm Shadow missiles into Russia. Starmer did it. The UK military did not stop him. The U.S. military did not stop Biden. They did not stop the UK. The Pentagon didn't tell the UK military, no, we're not going to give you permission to go ahead and launch 12 Storm Shadow missiles into Kursk. To make matters even worse, there may have been, there may be the possibility. This is just a guess. We were talking about it earlier today. It's just a guess. We have no evidence. We have nothing to confirm this. But Belousov and the commander of the group, Lapin, they did show up to Kursk today. They may have been there earlier. We don't know when they were actually there. This may have been some sort of a decapitation attempt to take out the commander, also taking out the defense minister. I mean, this is crazy stuff that the Biden White House and the UK military are doing.
Yeah.
Why do you think there are cooler heads? The Pentagon, I can see. I think there are cooler heads. Why do you think there are cooler heads in the UK military? It seems like everyone's gone insane in the UK.
Well, the first thing to say is that the point is that every section of the UK military has been absolutely hardline and determined to prosecute this war in Ukraine. We've actually had from the Ukrainians themselves a detailed account of the whole Krinky operation. This is the disastrous operation where the Ukrainians landed troops on the east bank of the Dnieper River in Kherson region, and it was all apparently planned and insisted upon by the British. The British military were fully behind preparing that particular operation. It was all expected that there would be a breakthrough and an advance all the way to Crimea, and instead it was a complete disaster. There are no moderates about Russia within the British military, but there is a difference between today and the day before yesterday, and that is that the Russians have now demonstrated a capability which my impression is no one fully assessed that they had. And the first thing to say is this missile, the Oreshnik, cannot be intercepted by any air defense systems. There have been articles about this all over the military media over the course of the last couple of hours. There is universal agreement that this missile, this capability, is one that cannot be defended against. Now, by the way, just to quickly add something, one of the reasons the Russians in this case gave a warning to the United States is because, of course, if a ballistic missile is launched, a ballistic missile with this kind of range, the Russians wanted to make sure that the Americans understood that this was not a missile carrying a nuclear warhead, because if the Americans had run away with the idea that it might have had a nuclear warhead, then of course they might have retaliated and we might find ourselves in a nuclear war. So that was why the Russians gave the warning this time. But the warnings that Putin is talking about, which will be longer warnings, they will presumably be an hour or something like that. And one can imagine the enormous game of nerves that the Russians are going to play with this, informing the British that there's going to be a strike on a particular facility, an industrial or a military industrial facility, or a port, perhaps, where an aircraft carrier is located, or something of that kind. I mean, the sheer stress and fear and worry and anxiety and hysteria that there is going to be in London in the hour or so before the missile hits is going to be just off the scale. And I think that when I said that the British military has some capable people, it does. And they can certainly see that. And they're going to be saying to Starmer, look, we just cannot afford to be in this situation. The Russians have now demonstrated that they have a capability we don't have. Our Storm Shadow missiles can have a tiny fraction of the power that the Russian missiles have. If we get into this kind of situation, the advantage for the Russians is lopsidedly in their favor. And that was not something that anybody, I think, fully understood 2 or 3 days ago. Now, about the possibility that this was a decapitation strike, the attack on Kursk with the Storm Shadows was a decapitation strike. I have to say that I think that there is a real possibility that that was the case. Of course, we don't know, and no one will admit it, and it's quite likely that, in fact, they will deny it.
And we don't know the timing of
We
when
don't know the
Belousov
timing.
and
We don't know
Lapin
anything.
arrived in Kursk.
We don't know anything
Just to
about
be clear,
this.
yeah.
And of course, we don't know where the meeting took place between Belousov and Lapin. And it's been suggested that this headquarters was too close to the front lines to be the place where this kind of meeting would have happened. But against that, if it was a small and unimportant headquarters, why launch the 12 Storm Shadow missiles against it, which is what the Ukrainians are telling us that they launched, and also HIMARS missiles? It seems a massive overkill against what would have been a small headquarters. And that does make me think that the British thought and the Ukrainians thought, and by the way, the Americans also thought, because how else? Apparently, without the Americans, these strikes on Russian territory cannot happen. They have the proprietary technology that makes strikes with Storm Shadows on Russia possible. Why else would all of these three countries, Ukraine, Britain and Russia, have expended so many expensive missiles in very short supply against a small little headquarters if they didn't think that there would be some important target there?
Yeah, it was a huge strike. I was thinking the same thing a couple of days ago, actually yesterday, when I was talking about this strike. 12 Storm Shadows, the HIMARS, everything. I mean, this was a big operation. Something important was in Kursk,
Or they thought there was.
or they thought there exactly, or they thought there was. But that brings me back to the point that I was making. If they thought that there was a general and a defense minister, that would explain why Putin was so pissed off. I mean, you could see as he was giving his statement the other day, he was angry.
Yes.
Absolutely angry. And if that is the case, that order came from the United States, ultimately from the United States. Now, I think there's a real possibility that the UK is influencing the United States, the Biden White House, to escalate.
Yes.
I have no doubt about that. That's a real possibility. They could be whispering in Sullivan and Blinken, Biden's ear, whatever's left of his ear, or what's in between his head. But they could be whispering to these guys, escalate, don't worry. Russia's bluffing. We know Russia. Putin's bluffing. Don't believe anything he says. But at the end of the day, Alexander, it is the United States and the U.S. military that makes the decision, not only for the ATACMS, but also for the Storm Shadows.
Absolutely. I mean, can I just say, again, as somebody who's worked in government, if you disagree with the lawful order of your minister, secretary of state, even the president of the United States, all you have to do is slow walk or find excuses or reasons not to carry out the order. After all, they did that. I mean, remember, they did that with Trump when he was in his last weeks as president.
Syria.
He wanted to pull the US troops out of Syria. They just didn't do it. So, you can always do that, especially with a president who's not going to be in office for very long. You just slow walk it. You just say, well, Mr. President, we've come up with all kinds of unexpected things. The target isn't quite what we thought it was.
Give them some ice cream and send them to bed.
Exactly. And, I wouldn't want, far from be it from me to advise the Pentagon on as to what to do. But if they get an order which, frankly, is irrational, or at the very least, incredibly dangerous, in a situation of escalation, which is what we're seeing now, well, they have options. They can do various things. If they don't agree with the order, then I think they should do them.
I wonder if, this is my final question, and we'll wrap it up. I wonder if they want Russia to hit a target. a UK target or a US target, whatever, a French, doesn't matter, French target, non-nuclear strike. I wonder if they want Russia to hit something, because this is the way to finally get boots on the ground in Ukraine. The situation in Ukraine is collapsing very quickly, and they've got 2 months left. Some sort of panic, hysteria, insanity has come over them, and they feel that they have 2 more months to get the collective West bogged down in Ukraine to such an extent that 10 Trumps, if Trump means what he says, then 10 Trumps would not be able to extract to extract the NATO forces that would be in Ukraine on the ground, or the escalation that would have occurred in these 2 months. I don't know. That's my sense of things. Is that maybe the ultimate goal of Biden and of Stammer, the people behind Biden and Stammer, is to get Russia to hit something, so that then they can escalate to the point where no one's going to be able to derail and stop Project Ukraine.
Well, I think that's quite possible. In fact, can I just say, while we have been here in Hungary, we have heard a senior person, very well-connected person within the Hungarian system, tell us that he's actually had overheard discussions between European officials about the need to send European troops to Ukraine. He didn't tell us anything about who those officials were that he overheard, but clearly there have been discussions to that effect. We've seen, rumors and reports about this, and it is absolutely true. It is definitely the case that the military situation in Ukraine is becoming catastrophic. There's been an article in the BBC, I discussed it in one of my recent programs, which finally, and for the first time, admits that the Ukrainian military is on the brink of complete collapse. However, if that is where we're heading, then I think there's a number of things that need to be said. Firstly, if troops are indeed deployed to Ukraine to fight the Russians, that is not, of course, going to deter the Russians from conducting further deep strikes against targets in European countries. Indeed, it would likely motivate them to conduct even more such strikes, and we have seen the capability that the Russians have. So it would be another step up the escalatory escalator, which the Russians have just demonstrated that they can match. The other thing that we have heard here in Hungary, and we've heard it again from very, very well-connected people, I don't want to say more because I don't want to disclose who these people were, but very, very well-connected people, is about the dire state of the European militaries, that they are in fact in no condition to fight the Russian army. If they're sent to Ukraine, we will have a military disaster on top of all of the others. In fact, it will be a disaster in which we will be faced with the situation of ever-growing escalation, and the only way out of it would be either to turn to the United States and ask the United States to come to the rescue of the Europeans, or to go all the way to the top and use nuclear weapons. Now, I have to say, these are impossibly dangerous scenarios. The United States does not have enough troops in Europe at the present time to intervene militarily in Ukraine. I think there's something like 50,000 US troops right across Europe. There's only about 20,000 who are remotely close to the battle lines. A lot of these are logistic troops. The way the Pentagon conducts war is it takes months to build up its forces. The United States is not ready to do that. And Donald Trump and his people, they've made it absolutely clear that the one red line for them with Ukraine, even the hardliners amongst them, is sending American troops to Europe. Now, in Biden's case, I think if this was all playing out a year ago, if there'd been escalations, if there'd been Russian missile strikes on Britain, and the British and the French and the Germans and the others had decided to send European troops to Ukraine, and those troops had been badly defeated. You remember, we were talking all about this.
Macron
was
yeah,
coming
to
up
Crimea,
with his proposal.
to Odessa.
Odessa, exactly. Well, if that had happened, then I think we can be confident that Biden would have tried to send or tried to support the European troops in Ukraine. I think in Trump's case, it is absolutely excluded. I think Donald Trump knows perfectly well that his electoral base will not support it, and nor will a significant part of the Republican Party in Congress. So I don't think this is going to happen. So yes, I think it's quite possible that some utterly obsessed, very frightened, because they got good cause to be frightened. If Project Ukraine collapses, if Donald Trump changes the policy in January, there's going to be a lot of people in Europe very exposed. Some very, very frightened people looking at defeat, looming defeat, being very angry. Frightened people are often very angry people, could indeed be thinking these utterly crazy and reckless and very, very dangerous things. But if they do that, it will turn out into a disaster. I don't think the United States will support them. I don't think Donald Trump will support them. They will be against the Russian army on their own. They will face defeat, and they will face a political crisis within Europe itself, with furious European publics, the like of which we have never seen before.
Yeah, I think that's the key to, just a final comment. I think that's the key to all of this is that Biden had the opportunity, the Biden White House had the opportunity last year, and many times over the past 3 years, to get boots on the ground or to escalate to a point with Russia that it would have been a hot war between Russia and the collective West. And he backed down, rightly. Right, the few correct decisions that Biden made was to back away from a hot war between the U.S. and Russia. Macron wanted it. Macron was pushing for it, and Biden said no. The attack is missiles, the long range missile strikes. He had many opportunities to green light that, and he said no. But the key to all of this is that after the election, with only 2 months left, they've decided. I say Biden. Everyone that's watching this video knows what I mean when I say Biden. Biden has decided that there's 2 months left. We need to burn this whole thing down, to break this thing, to cause as much chaos as possible, and to also get as much money out of there, into there and out of there. So that's why they're giving so much money in there, because they're going to pull it out of there. Everyone that's watching this video knows what I mean. I think that's the key to all of this. But this is extremely dangerous, and the momentum is going to overtake them. The momentum of their actions, of their insanity, is overtaking them. Your final thoughts?
Absolutely,
this
absolutely.
video.
I mean, the reason Biden didn't do it last year or in the first half of this year was that he very much wanted to win re-election in November. Of course, he didn't win re-election in November because his party didn't allow him to stand. And then, of course, his vice president took the leadership of the Democrats, and she was defeated as well. If Biden had been re-elected in November, if he had still been president and been re-elected in November, we might very well have found ourselves in all these catastrophic scenarios of American troops being sent to fight in Ukraine, of all of the escalations that we're talking about. Thankfully, that didn't happen. If Harris had been elected, there is a very, very strong possibility, even a probability, that things might have gone the same way. But it didn't happen. And one of the reasons it didn't happen is because the American electorate said no. I mean, this is not something, that we can, we just say because they didn't vote for Harris, they voted for Trump. We've had a lot of anecdotal information and even some polling data now. And one of the reasons why Trump won the election was because Biden-Harris was seen as war presidents, potential war presidents, and Trump, by contrast, was seen as the person who would keep the United States out of war. It came up repeatedly. It comes up repeatedly when people are asked why they voted for Trump. So thankfully, the American people said no. And that makes it, I would say, extremely unlikely in the end that it is going to happen. This whole affair over the last couple of days, to my mind, shows how important this election we have just had was.
All right. We will end it there. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like what we are wearing in this video update. There is a link to the Duran shop in the description box down below. Take care.